The design process, and this is actually Katie Measley, who sounds uncannily like Carolyn Measley because I'm her sister. And the reason I'm doing this particular slideshow is that I was the designer of all the technical parts of a production that my friend Candace Deming wrote for a play called Broken Bridges. So we're going to talk about the process that I went through with her to develop the scenic design components for that show. Okay, so a few things you need to know about the production. It premiered in 1996 at the Fry Theater in St. Paul. It's a black box theater. There's 3 seat banks for the audience, and typically those are set up in a thrust arrangement. And so there's a proscenium opening at the upstage portion of that's 16 feet high and 28 feet wide. That needed to be filled in some capacity for this production. And then the acting area is a little bit flexible, 24 to 36 feet wide by 14 feet up to downstage. And the setting for the show is contemporary. It's a small, comfortable family cabin. Some notes were that it was going to be not too fancy, but also not too rustic. All right, so in May, we had a brainstorming meeting. The director had a play sort of in rough format. She knew the plot, she knew the characters, she had some ideas about the visual, but the script was still a work in progress. So you'll see a bunch of different notes on the right. Some of those are physical measurements of the space, and some of those are drawings about some initial ideas. Maybe in the middle, it would look like a cutaway wall. Maybe on the bottom, it would be a little bit more structured. It would be a framework or a physical wall. There needed to be a suggestion of outdoors so we could tell that we were in the woods. But the director had very strong opinions about fake flowers. Maybe putting some grass or a tree or something like that could be helpful. And she was very clear that this is a lake house. So not a little cottage at a camp and not a resort. Okay, so initial plan, starting with the script that I got in September. Notes of each item needed, so you'll see those up at the top, and then a drawing of the space so we could see where the center line is. You'll see that at the bottom of a lot of these pages, that big C with the big L designates the center line of the space. And then SB on the right, left, and at the bottom stands for seat bank. So there's a quick sketch of a top elevation or map view of the stage, and then a quick sketch of a 3D side elevation so we can kind of see some walls in format. And as I was reading through the script, I was thinking about the layout. So sometimes there are stage directions saying that so-and-so crosses down left and heats up water on the kettle. Okay, that's helpful to know because then somewhere down left there needs to be a kettle or kitchen or some sort of heating element. Got it. So from reading through that script, I'm imagining the actors traveling through that space and also making notes about places that are needed. For example, a bedroom and a kitchen and a living room and a back porch, and then a driveway or some indication of where they're coming from. All right, so floor plan number 1. This is a close-up view of what you're looking at before. Each of the things that you see on here are specifically mentioned in the script, or they're things that I would imagine would fill a family cabin at the lake. This top elevation you're going to do initially is just for the director's reference. It's helpful to have some basic measurements. How big is this stage space? But you don't necessarily need to know how big is that wall or that door. Some of those labels are going to be helpful for the director who knows less than you do about the technical elements so they can picture what's involved. And then here's an initial rendering, which gives an idea to the director about your aesthetic. So here, if the director were looking at this, they can see that there are walls and they're sort of cut away. It doesn't mean that they're decaying. It just means that we're sort of peeking into this landscape that is filled with furniture and a cozy rug and a screen door, etc. So this is happening in September. And then after sending that information to the director, there was some initial feedback. Kitchen wasn't needed, although there's reference to food being made. We don't actually see them cooking it in a way that is important to the script at that stage of its development. There was a desire to swap the front room and the bedroom, so maybe play around with where those are in relationship to each other. And then the director said she definitely did not want a wall downstage. So we're just going to take that away and use the floor space beyond the set as well. And then we still see those seat banks right, left, and at the bottom, so we know where the audience is. All right, this led me to many questions. Why did we only remove the kitchen? Why was the bedroom still there? Why would we need to build more platforms? I could see some pros and cons for that, but maybe the whole cabin is on one level instead of offsetting the bedroom. Why might we have doors but no walls? What would it look like to have the walls taken out? Would that be weird to have freestanding doors? Do we want the space to feel a little more constricted because of the mood of the show? They're trapped in a cabin. It rains a lot of the weekend, so the walls could fill the space mentally of we can't really go anywhere. We're stuck here together. All right. So a lot of times it could be really helpful to say, okay, so there's wall A, there's wall B, and there's wall C. How big is each of those walls? How much space is it taking up? Here I'm playing around a little bit with the location of the doors and the height of the walls. Lots of notes, lots of math. That scale ruler that you have comes in very handy. And just a note for you all, these drawings are drawn at 1 foot to 3/8 inch scale. You might use 1 foot to 1/4. Okay, so then here's some of those dimensions in action. So now I'm getting definitely more technical. You can see some things on this top elevation by way of treatment. So in that bottom section where it says porch, we can see that the porch is a stone walkway kind of patio area. They aren't bricks. It's not uniform. There are large stones and small stones, and it would probably be down below the level of the set. So we're starting to get a sense that the cabin itself is up a little bit, or there would be some sort of sliding door. Maybe there isn't a step involved, so maybe it's only a few inches below. Those are all possibilities. You'll also notice at the top, on the opposite side of that, there's a little mirror of that same stone treatment outside the front door. Part of that has to do with aesthetics and balance, and part of it is just if these are the kind of people that are going to put stone outside one door, they probably do it outside of the other because it's easier to clean inside the house or whatever the case may be. We're also seeing on this top elevation some measurements and initial information. Each of these pieces of furniture that you see are drawn to scale, so they're in proportion to the whole set as well. And then there's a series of technical drawings for those elevations. So we have 3 walls. There's one longer wall that's kind of upstage right, and then there are 2 shorter walls that form that upstage left and downstage left kind of corner. So there would be some drawings to show where these line up with each other. But on these front elevations, we're noticing specific measurements of heights. We're looking at proportions of the door. We're looking at details like little window, mirrored or pictures that are hanging on either side of that door down left. And we can tell that all 3 of these walls don't have wallpaper, because if they did, that would show up in this specific elevation. So some sort of painting. And then the rear elevations are technical drawings that flip the other side of it. So these are those same walls. I put them on the same parts of the page so you can kind of picture what it looks like. And when we're looking at the back of it, they're giving information to the scene shop about how to construct the set. So how big is that opening shows up on the front and the back, but here we can see where the braces are and the toggles and the cornerstones to know exactly how to build that flat so that it's structured and therefore secure and not going to fall over. All right, so here in November, you see kind of a new aesthetic appear. Instead of those crumbly walls with the functional use, so it looked like the wall of a cabin, we see a little bit more geometry involved. There's clean cut lines, and the new version of the script kind of fits this idea of a cabin better than the other version. We're seeing tension between the characters come about in the script, and there's a lot of kind of balancing acts between these 4 women who are close friends from college, and then the dynamic of a stranger showing up, needing a place to be out of the downpour and thunderstorm happening outside with a broken down car. So that's going to show up a little bit more in the scenery if it's hard, straight lines and forms compared to crumbling walls that shows things are falling apart. Wasn't the look that the director was going for. Okay, so fast forward to February. Notes from the director. On track with this new idea of line and form, really a desire to have minimal sets. So kind of defining and filling that space, especially with that proscenium that's upstage that we were talking about. So there needs to be something there, not just a black curtain, but a sense of movement and action within the set and having architectural visuals without obstructing the set in any way. So no walls downstage. You'll see some scribble marks that designates maybe some vegetation that's outside of the set. We've taken away the patio and just added the idea of a step so people can tell they're going down to the outside. I'm starting to play around with some ideas about suspended windows and maybe some lattice work framing instead of having physical walls. What would that look like? So then, playing with some new ideas, lots of choices. At this point, as you look to the right, you'll see version 1 and version 2 and version 3 and version 4 and version 5, and I got completely stuck. So I had a meeting with the senior designer who's in charge of our department and overseeing myself and this project. And he gave me some ideas about some specific designers to look at. So I went to find out more about Heidi Ettinger's designs versus Michael Juergen versus Tony Stragus. He also suggested that a lot of the aesthetics for August Wilson's play Fences would be a really good fit for some of the forms that I was trying to create for this piece, Broken Bridges. And then because of the name of the play, he said, sometimes it's helpful to research things that have nothing to do with theater. So go look at a bunch of architecture books, look at bridges, look at other types of forms, maybe some home designs, and see if that helps you clarify what you're looking for. So went off and did that, and lo and behold, the next day, some of those ideas played out in this way. So this is one of the reasons why it's great to do some artistic renderings. The director could look at these 4 versions and see clear concepts. So you'll notice some similarities, and you'll also notice that in each of these, we're looking at hanging windows, a door that's freestanding, some platforms and levels. So there's a bedroom space and a living room space, and then a step down to the outside. Maybe a fireplace up in that upstage corner by the door, and that there's some sort of a hint of a ceiling that suggested perhaps that looks like railroad ties, like in the top left or the top right, or perhaps it's spanning out like in that bottom left and right version of things. So then we closed in on a final aesthetic. So you'll see for the main room and the bedroom, settled on some triangular lines that were framed with some perpendicular pieces to suggest the roof. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see that the front door was filled in with a screen door compared to the bedroom door where it's just a frame that's sitting there. And the reason that there are rear elevations for both of those is that it tells us the frame of each door is built exactly the same. And then there isn't an elevation for that screen door because that was actually a stock piece that we could pull out of the storage area. And so I built my elevations around the door that already existed in our theater. And then you'll see front and rear elevations for that main room window and front and rear elevations for the bedroom window. Important to note that because these are final elevations and technical drawings, you could take these and use a scale ruler and measure them and measure those angles and build a set that looks identical to the one you're about to see. So here, these are not the best as far as a photograph that is in a book that then got taken a picture of that then showed up on this page. But just to talk you through it, you can kind of see a hint that that back door has a beaded curtain hanging in it. And when you look at that bottom picture, you can see that we did use a fireplace and that the fireplace is near that front door. There's a table and chairs that suggest a kitchen. There's a couch and a coffee table. They're on a braided rug. And you can see on the upper right the treatment that we did with the floorboards so that it suggests wooden floorboards. But again, there's a little bit of sense of playfulness with the space and the form because boards in a house don't actually get wider and wider. some of those angles coming from the top to the bottom, played off of the ceiling pieces that unfortunately you can't see in this particular picture. And just to let you know, the elevation for the final version is starting to be in color, so you'll see some hints of green, some hints of brown. They're not completely in color because the director said, listen, it's more important to do that on the 3D model that you have to build to finish this project, and you're also doing the costume design and the lighting design and the sound design and the property design. In this case, we had to build that coffee table from scratch and the fireplace. He said, don't worry about coloring in this particular thing. It's not important. Depending on which design project you end up doing for this course, you may end up doing a color elevation of one of those pieces, and there will be other videos to tell you a little bit more about that. But this is how we went from those initial ideas to this completed set. It worked out great. It was beautiful, if I do say so myself. And thanks so much for listening.